Hello. So I have had this essay of sorts in my mind for kind of a while, and I really need to talk about it. So today I'm going to be talking about that time South Park accidentally wrote a scathing critique of ABA therapy. The episode in question is called Tst. It is from season 10, episode 7, and in it Leanne, Cartman's mother, gets so fed up with her son's insane psychopathic behavior.
I'm sorry I handcuffed Billy Turner's ankle to the school flagpole.
You know that's not the point.
Okay, I'm sorry I handcuffed Billy Turner's ankle to a flagpole and then gave him a hacksaw. And then told him I had poisoned his lunch milk and that the only way he could get to the antidote in time would be to saw through his leg.
That's very naughty, Eric.
That she desperately reaches out to, of all people, reality TV hosts, starting with two of the famous nannies from like the early mid 2000s. We start with Nanny 911, where Cartman emotionally terrorizes her by at first just not listening to anything she says. She tries to be firm with him as if he is a normal child, which he is not.
This video game is going right here on the counter until we've done some chores. Now, first thing we're going to do is make your bed.
And eventually it ends up in this amazing scene, which is equal parts hilarious and horrifying.
Well, I'm feeling confused because I don't understand why you became a nanny.
Me? Well, because I love children, like you.
Right, but if you love children so much, how come you're not a mommy?
Oh, I just never had kids.
Why not?
It just didn't happen.
You're sterile, is that it? No, that's too convenient of an excuse. The truth is, nobody ever wanted to have babies with you. Isn't that it? Always the mom's maid, never the mom? It must be hard on you, knowing that the years are ticking away, your friends all getting married, and all the while your uterus slowly shriveling away, drying up, becoming totally worthless.
What kind of monster would...
Yes, let the anger come! Strike me down while you can! But it won't make your dried-up ovaries any more fertile!
That's it! I'm not doing this!
So then we move on to the next nanny from TV, which is Super Nanny. And, I have got to say that I never used to watch Nanny 911, but I did used to watch a lot of Super Nanny, and this parody is absolutely sublime. It's so funny to me. Like, it's very accurate in the brief time it's happening on screen, where you see her with the little, miniature TV she has in her car where she's ostensibly watching, a video edited together of this child's horrible behavior, but it's, done in After Effects. She's not really watching that.
This child's behavior is totally unacceptable.
And then she gets to the house and she says, well, by golly, I'll give it 3 days. And then 3 days later,
From hell! It's from hell!
she's in a mental institution. So the guy at the psych ward, interestingly enough, is the one who suggests she reach out to Cesar Millan, the dude from Dog Whisperer. And here's where we get to the ABA therapy critique. See, as a bit of background, ABA therapy, or applied behavioral analysis, is one of the most, if not the most commonly used quote unquote therapies for autistic children around the world. You see it a lot in the United States and Canada and in the UK. From what I hear, it's growing in popularity in South Africa and even Ireland. It's not a good time for autistic people, though. Autistic people have been saying for decades that ABA therapy has traumatized them. there is significant preliminary evidence that ABA is linked to post-traumatic stress. Yeah, of course, that's a study that has been all but dismissed out of hand. And granted, its methodology was not perfect, but the results are still, one, significant enough, and two, in line with so much anecdotal evidence from other people who have survived ABA to be worthy of consideration and, more importantly, follow-up studies. Note from post-production Fallon, in the time since when I started making this video and the current time of recording, which is July 31st, 23, the American Medical Association, or the AMA, has passed an amendment rescinding its universal and sole support of ABA therapy for autistic children, based in part around the vast quantity of anecdotal evidence supplied by autistic survivors of ABA therapy about the harms that it has done to them. So that's a good first step. Hooray! Autistic people have compared it to conversion therapy for autistic people, or just outright call it conversion therapy for autistic people, because it was made by the same guy, or at least pioneered by the same guy, Evar Levas, in the 60s, pioneered LGBT conversion therapy and ABA therapy at the same time in the same lab at UCLA. Yeah, that happened. It's not great. God, just reading these studies again makes me wish that I could bring Ivar Lavas back from the dead just so that I could kill him. I swear to God, the Nazis burned books about transgender people so that this guy could fly. Which brings us to another common critique of ABA therapy, is that it is essentially dog training for children, which is a horrifying sentence to hear, I would hope. For most people, I'm sure that's a horrifying sentence to hear. And it's not without merit. There is this article here. It was written by a former ABA therapist who says that she used to abuse children for a living as a glorified dog trainer. Here's this other article written by a professional dog trainer who says actually ABA is worse because modern dog training has diverged so much from this Skinner box sort of outlook. If you were a dog trainer and you treated a dog the way that ABA therapists often treat children, you would likely get your dog trainer license revoked. Because according to this professional dog trainer, they would not treat a dog that way, ever. But hey, don't just take my word on that. Here is an ABA therapist who, as I recall, got absolutely fucking dragged for this, who said that ABA is a lot like training chickens. So that's how they see autistic kids, like animals to train. And that is the context that I needed to lay out before getting into this analysis of the Cesar Millan section of the South Park episode. So, Cesar Millan arrives, the dog whisperer, and all throughout, Cesar's tactics with Cartman are very ABA.
So the child needs to learn that he's not the most important person in the house.
You can stop talking behind my back. I'm right here, fruitcake. Knock it off!
See, I'm not validating his bad behavior with either negative or positive response.
He uses many Skinnerian tactics to control Cartman, including planned ignoring on multiple occasions, use of negative reinforcement, including pain, as well as positive punishment, quote, not validating his behavior with either a positive or negative response. Again, that's planned ignoring. And in that line, he is teaching Leanne to do planned ignoring as well, which is, quite frankly, very often abusive on its own. If a child has a need and you're ignoring them, that is at the very least neglect. So, one thing that Cesar says a lot in this episode is that he is asserting dominance, that he is using and he wants Leanne to use dominant behavior to control Cartman so that he ends up being submissive and ostensibly relaxed. Which, wow, holy shit. Holy shit. So ABA does not generally use the language of dominance and submissiveness. It uses other language to mean the same stuff, such as, getting a child to the point where they have an extinction burst. And then they're much better after they have at first exploded, perhaps, and then, given up all will to resist. That is essentially what ABA in general wants from its clients, which is horrifying. Another common tactic in ABA that Cesar Millan uses on Cartman is denial of food.
Okay, let me show you how to express the dominant energy. What I've done is I've brought over some Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Ooh, Colonel?
I am going to eat first because that is what the pack leader does.
Give me the chicken. Give me some chicken. What are you doing? I want chicken. Give me some goddamn chicken.
I am not going to acknowledge the child's attempt at aggressive, dominant behavior. Now you eat the chicken.
Mom, give me some chicken. I want some chicken, Mom.
We won't reward him until he's in a calm, submissive behavior.
Near the end of this section, when Cartman does appear submissive and anxious, he actually seems anxious. Cesar calls it submissive and relaxed, which is just very typical of an ABA therapist completely misreading the emotional expression and needs of their clients. That's just kind of what they do. Because ABA doesn't train its therapists to look out for the emotional needs of the child or sometimes adult. They look for, again, this is something Cartman says later, they look for changed behavior, which they take as a sign of changes to the mind or personality. But that's just not how humans work. Even Leanne notices this when she says that
He still fights me every step of the way. I feel like he's doing what I tell him, but that inside he's still the same angry, spoiled child.
Don't worry. When you correct the behavior, eventually you will see a change in the personality.
which again I must emphasize is not really how people work at all. Because you're in the background, Cartman is actually planning to murder his mom.
All right, now here's the plan. At 9:45 tonight, I will sneak out of my room and leave the house, leaving the back door unlocked. You guys come into the house at 10:30 p.m. sharp, having given me enough time to get down to Perkins and be seen by everyone there. And then all four of you go upstairs to kill my mom. Dude, we're not killing your mom.
Which is a clear as day sign that this intervention is not working at all. Okay, so there is a part of this episode where Cartman is briefly homeless, and the statistics on homelessness in neurodivergent people are not great. If you look at it, about 3/4 of people who are homeless have some sort of mental disorder. Let's see, this study I found is from 2 years ago, so yeah, that's pretty current. But Cesar, interestingly, does not encourage Leanne to care when Cartman runs away. In fact, he says the opposite.
But what if he does run away?
Let him go. He'll be back. This is a good opportunity for you to relax and enjoy your favorite hobby.
And like, this is one of the problems with behaviorist interventions in general, is that they're fundamentally selfish. They're not about the experiences of the client. They're about the experiences of the other people in the client's life, with no consideration for the emotional well-being of the client, which is, again, something that dog training has evolved past. But ABA therapy, I don't think, is capable of doing that. It's just so bad. It's so bad. But after Cartman comes home from his brief stint of being homeless, he tries roughing it out on the streets, and he, for obvious reasons, can't stand it. So he goes home, not quite defeated yet, because he makes demands of his mother, but Cesar is still there, and he encourages her to stick with the behavior plan. And she does this time. She partakes in the physical abuse and the planned ignoring, and Cartman eventually just kind of collapses and gives up. And in the next scene, he appears submissive and anxious, but he's not really Cesar says that, see, look, this is the exact kind of behavior we're looking for. He's submissive and relaxed. He's clearly not relaxed. He's clearly walking on eggshells. And again, this relates to ABA therapy, because they are not trained to even know about the emotional well-being of their clients. They just aren't trained in that, so they don't look for it. And they're often very wrong about the child's or the client's emotional state, which leads to a fundamental misunderstanding, quite often, of the behaviors that they are trying to alter. And it just leads to traumatic experiences for the clients very often. It's such a terrible industry. Oh my God. But, in secret, even though, Cesar insists that Cartman is relaxed and this is the behavior they're looking for, he's actually plotting to murder his mother. So he gets to that while she's asleep.
You forced me to do this.
But mid-murder attempt, it seems like Cartman is having some kind of internal crisis, some sort of emotional reaction at last to this dog training, and some part of him realizes
Maybe all these changes are good for me. Maybe the world doesn't revolve around me.
and that maybe he doesn't have the right to murder his mother. But he fights this realization, so much so that he appears to, based on the animation, he appears to actually split. Like, I was watching this episode with one of my system friends, one of my friends who has DID, and it was like, dude, he's splitting right now. And I'm like, yeah, wow, the realization that the world doesn't revolve around him is so traumatic that he DID splits and relegates that realization to a whole other altar that probably almost never sees the light of day. And then he kind of passes out in the hallway, having left his attempted murder weapon by his mother's bed. The next morning, he appears to have changed. He is eating a healthy breakfast, and he's studying and being all around a pleasant boy. And Leanne is, very proud of him, and she says so. And then Cesar drops by, and he's checking in on how Cartman is doing, and she says he's doing great now. And Cesar's like, okay, well, cool, I can leave. And Leanne was like, oh, I thought we were friends. And he's like, no, you were just a client. Bye. And Leanne is depressed by this because, she thought she was making a friend in Cesar. So she goes to Cartman and realizing that she can still have a friend in her son instead of, having healthy boundaries with him, she again returns to her old ways.
And then we'll go to Target and I'll buy you a Mega Ranger.
Could I perhaps have 2 Mega Rangers?
Yes, darling. You can have whatever you want.
So Leanne returns to her enabling ways. And at the very end, the final shot of the episode, and he has a smile on his face because this is exactly what he planned. He was manipulating her the entire time. So that's the episode where South Park accidentally wrote a scathing critique of ABA. And now it's time to analyze all that in a bit more depth. I keep insisting this was an accident because I don't believe that Matt and Trey intended to make this about ABA, but it's the only thing I can interpret it as, being an autistic person who grew up around ABA pretty consistently. So I'm just going to reiterate that dog training for children is a common critique of ABA therapy for a host of reasons. For one, behavioral science began with experiments on animals, and ABA has not evolved much from this position. Actual animal training, however, has evolved to be much less cruel since this time. There are many tactics shared by ABA and, at the very least, bad or outdated dog training, including planned ignoring, denial of food, operant conditioning tactics, including pain, no specific care for the client's emotional well-being, clicker training, overall just not dealing with the child or the client's underlying issues, which make this behavior happen in the first place, what they will often refer to as challenging behavior. That's something I really want to focus on in the last one. So this is very much derived from B.F. Skinner's radical behaviorism, which modern psychologists consider out of date. But it is still the basic premise on which ABA therapy, as well as LGBT conversion therapy, functions. They're just not addressing the underlying causes. In the case of neurodivergent, especially autistic children in ABA therapy, there are often, vast, chasms of unmet needs, emotional and physical, especially when a child is non-speaking and denied AAC, potentially some language deprivation involved, in my opinion. If you don't address these underlying issues, then you're not going to have a happier, healthier child. You may just end up with a more compliant child, which is not actually a good thing. If your child is trained to be completely compliant, then how are they supposed to assert healthy boundaries when they need to? Autistic people in general have a very worrying rate of being sexually abused. Eric Cartman is clearly not neurotypical and has experienced child sexual abuse on multiple occasions on screen. And it's not a foregone conclusion that this type of therapy used en masse on autistic children around the world that emphasizes compliance with the therapist's demands at the expense of one's own emotional needs on a regular basis, might have something to do with that. Maybe. It's hard to tell. We need more research. Ugh. Quick note from the editor's suite. When I sarcastically remarked that we need more research, I was not calling research bad. Far from it. Objective data is always good to have. My point is that we, in the everyday sense, shouldn't need scientific data that most people don't know how to read anyway in order to believe oppressed people about the ways their oppression hurts them. The demand for such is an expression of how capitalistic social hierarchy defends itself by demanding that detractors prove their point that the system hurts them and needs to change, as a tactic to make you so exhausted that you might stop fighting. Because even when there is strong, bourgeois-approved scientific evidence that oppression harms the oppressed, oppressors will usually just ignore the data. But to bring it back to Cartman, in Cartman's case, I believe the underlying issues with him stem from early experiences of developing attachment with his mother and basically lack of a father figure. He's always felt less than and othered for not knowing who his father is. It's been a major plot point throughout much of the series. Who is Cartman's father? Is it Cartman's mother? Is it Scott Tenorman's dad? We just don't know. The father question is not super relevant. What is relevant is Cartman's emotional reaction to these attachments. In Cartman's early childhood, his mother was, at least at times, a sex worker, which is not in and of itself bad. I'm going to say that right away. That's not in and of itself bad. But Cartman may have been exposed to some things in the home that were traumatic, including, his mother having sex with, random people in the town, and he doesn't really understand what's going on. Even, her doing crack, which is definitely worse. And getting bullied fairly often in the early show for his mother being, a dirty slut was not great for his emotional well-being, for his attachment style, for his overall relationship with his mother, women, and the world at large. Given that, I think that family therapy to repair their relationship slash attachment style might help if they get it in while he's still young enough for it to, have an impact on his neuroplastic brain. Because in recent seasons, she stops enabling him, but that doesn't seem to be enough to change him because he's still doing a lot of the same shit. But they both need professional help and, not, ostensible help from some reality TV hack. However, psychotherapy in this area of, fictionalized Colorado is shown to be not great whatsoever, especially in, some episodes about Butters. A very compelling reason for why Cartman has not been to this kind of therapy is that it may not exist in or near South Park, Colorado. So that leads us to the final question. Can Cartman really change? So, as to whether Cartman can change, it's really hard to say. I mean, maybe that's not completely fair, because it's not very hard to see that even in adulthood, given plenty of good opportunities, he's still a piece of shit. But as we see in post-COVID, Cartman is still a scheming little shit who, frankly, only married a Jewish woman and had kids with her and converted and became a rabbi just for the chance to mess with Kyle one day. I'm reading between the lines a little bit, but barely. The dude comes up with this time traveling scheme to go back in time and shoot Kyle when he's still a kid. And it's just an absolutely insane time. Some discourse about Cartman specifically came up on Twitter this week, actually, where people who it seems like have only seen the more recent seasons and not the early seasons where he, killed the kid's parents and fed them to him, try to make these excuses and just make it seem like Cartman's many things, but he's not that bigoted. Like, oh, come on, yes he is. The dude has led a Nazi rally dressed as Hitler. Kyle is absolutely right not to believe this change that we see in post-COVID. I'm not sure Cartman can change, at least not very easily. And it being a comedy show where we need characters to be shitheads sometimes, I don't think he's going to be written that way. And I think the ending of post-COVID really showed that Matt and Trey probably don't intend to give Cartman a significant character arc. The closest to a significant character arc we really saw for him was in this episode Tist, where they basically did ABA, and because it's ABA, it didn't work. So perhaps correct interventions might help, but that's a big maybe. So I don't believe Matt and Trey intended to make this episode about ABA therapy, but it would be really cool if they did. And if either of them come out someday and say that they did, I would be really impressed. I think that would be very cool of them. But no, I don't think they intended to write it this way. Because, they've never addressed autism directly within the show. They've never done that. Hey, so when I recorded that, I was speaking off the cuff, and I had forgotten about the existence of the Asperger's episode, which is one of my least favorites. I hate it. I find it completely just not representative of what autism is like at all. Not to mention that Asperger's itself is an outdated label because Hans Asperger was almost definitely a fucking Nazi. I hate that episode, and I probably repressed the memory of it. Um, However, yeah, they have sort of addressed autism directly because of that episode, but not well. They did not do it well. I'm going to say right now, it sucked. Many characters are at the very least coded autistic, especially Butters, but I don't believe they intended to do this, no. That said, they did write an episode with dog training for children in it, and dog training for children is simultaneously a very common critique of ABA therapy and something actual dog trainers reject, saying that they would never treat a dog the way ABA therapists treat their clients. ABA therapy fails to see the whole child because they only focus on challenging behaviors and implementing therapy regimens to change those behaviors. They're not trained to notice or care for the client's emotional well-being. And that's on purpose, because if they did notice the child's well-being, they would quit. So what I really want to focus on, though, is the fact that ABA therapy, much like these outdated methods of dog training, do not address the underlying issues that the client is experiencing. For instance, say we're talking about a non-speaking 7-year-old in ABA therapy for 40 hours a week, which is common and also a ridiculous amount. Most adults are brain dead, metaphorically, after a 40-hour work week, and we expect toddlers to do that? Absolute trying to think of a non-ableist word. Chicanery? Maybe? No, that's not the right word. Whatever. It's absolute bullshit. I'm just going to go with that. It's bullshit. His underlying issues, I think, are mainly emotional and psychological. Because I think ultimately the thing he wants the most is his mother's approval and friendship and her enabling, but he wants her to love him, and he doesn't always feel like she does. The ABA that he's put through in this episode clearly doesn't help, because ABA never helps. It can give parents the appearance that it helps, which is what we see with Leanne, but it just doesn't. It results in kids who are more emotionally distant and less likely to express their own needs, and just more likely to isolate themselves and dissociate a lot. It's not great for one's mental health. And as accidental as I believe it probably was, I do have to give kudos to Matt and Trey for writing a scathing critique of ABA therapy in an episode about literal dog training for children.
Knock it off!
See, I'm not validating his bad behavior with either negative or positive response.
So that was this video about South Park. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe, because I've got more content coming. Give a quick preview.
Ike is watching PewDiePie play Dragon Age.
I'm going dun 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 dun.
PewDiePie! And this kid is watching Cartman commenting on people commenting on Dragon Age.
It's a really great game. The characters are so rich.
Butters is such a butthole, oh my god. Come on,
Thank you for sticking around this far. If you enjoyed it, please do leave a like and subscribe and all that stuff. And if you really enjoyed it, please be sure to check out my Patreon, because then you can get early access to this content, and then at a certain point it may even have better production value, which would be so cool, and that's really all I want. I am going to talk seriously about, my life and disabilities at the moment. So, I, as the sentence previous would imply, I am multiply disabled, and due to reasons that I probably shouldn't get into for fear of being sued or something, I can't get on SSDI at the moment either. So I am really hoping that this video making can be a real job, and that I can successfully pull this off and have maybe even a community, and just money. I really need money or I'm going to die. Oh, that sounds like I'm guilting you guys, and I don't want to. I'm just basically, I'm really hoping this can be my job. So if you want to help with that, my Patreon is right there, and I may also set up some other means to, give me one-time donations if that's something people want to do. But for now, Patreon's the best option. Also, if you sign up on my Patreon, you will get a copy of the nonfiction book that I am ostensibly writing about ABA therapy. So yeah, please do check all that out. Thank you for sticking around, and have a nice rest of your day.